My name's Chris. Good morning, everybody. Andy asked me to stop in and share some of my experience. I've been using AI for the last several years, AI type of systems for the last several years, both on the startup side and also on the enterprise side. And wanted to kind of share some of my insights of some of the things that I've learned in the last several years. I'm an entrepreneur, and I also help other entrepreneurs start up existing companies or new companies. My background is all primarily technology, and I focus primarily on software-based startups. So that's primarily my perspective as we go through this. And I'm just going to go ahead and jump into it because I know we're kind of compressed on time, and I want to get to the fun stuff, which is all the startups. So what I'd like to do today is actually just go through, I've got 10 kind of insights or lessons learned as I've gone through and implemented AI type of systems into business environments. Again, as Andy mentioned, definitely two-way. If you guys have any questions as we're going through this, please let me know. Just raise your hand, we'll go ahead and jump into it. And these are the 10 we'll go through. In the interest of time, I'm just going to go ahead and jump into them. One thing most of these are common sense. But for the most part, some of them actually fly in the face of a lot of the hype that's out there today. So hopefully you already know a lot of this stuff. It's just maybe putting it into a little bit of a different context. And to start with that, there's really nothing new here. This is effectively just coming down to existing. We've gone through migrations like this before, right? So basically, we've gone from a regular phone to a smartphone, right? That's basically all AI is doing for us. It's making our existing non-smart stuff today smart, right? It's giving it some intelligence, as Andy mentioned, giving it kind of some of the decision making and some of the human intelligence functions that we kind of take for granted within our own mind, but also adding that into non-smart devices today. Primarily, what's actually happening here, so in the 20th century, we mechanized work, right? So through multiple phases, we converted electrical power, steam power, all that kind of stuff into mechanical work. Now we're actually doing that through intelligence. So we're automating intelligence. Okay? And what it really comes down to is AI is just software, right? It's taking the next step of the evolution of software. As our software has gotten more complex over the years, and I'm going to kind of use machine learning and AI in the same context, in the context of this discussion. But as software has gotten more and more complex, we've had to move towards a more machine learning type of programming model where we can no longer hard code or handwrite software rules. We can now do it through data, which is machine learning. And the example I always like to use is how would a software developer teach a computer to recognize a dog? Right? If you actually look at, there's all kinds of nuances in here, and if you break all that down into if then else statements, you got to kind of look at how do you look at the shape, how do you look at the colors, how do you look at the face, all that kind of stuff. It's very difficult to actually hand code that into a computer from a personal developer perspective. But if we have a whole bunch of data of existing images, we can use machine learning to train the computer very easily to recognize dogs in images. Okay. So that's really what's happening here is we've gone from hand coding software to using machine learning to use computers to train themselves. And now we've actually kind of expanded that, and AI is kind of a bigger scope. It actually works, right? So over the last couple of years, over the last 50 years, most people have thought that AI just didn't work. And now over the last 5 years or so, a lot of these things are starting to really take off because we really have moved beyond having to hard code stuff and actually gone into machine learning to train our computers. Okay. And as Mark Andreessen famously said, I'm sure everybody's all aware, software is eating the world. This is a essay that a very popular VC in the space put out, Software is Eating the World, which is basically saying that software is basically taking over every industry, right? And I'm sure we're all very familiar with that. What's happening now is that, as I mentioned before, AI is really just the next evolution of software. So AI is now eating all the software, right? It's just making all the software we've already written smarter. Okay? Okay, so think big. Everything is pretty much up for grabs for this. So, there's a couple ways to say this, but my personal take is that everything that mankind has invented is pretty much up for grabs, right? Everything is going to be reinvented smart, right? So we're going to integrate artificial intelligence into pretty much everything out there. And the example I always use is the wheel, right? Even today, you can, a lot of luxury cars actually have computer monitoring systems for tires. It'll actually track tire pressure, all that kind of stuff. Well, it's not going to be long before an entrepreneur writes a little bit smarter algorithms around how to monitor those tires and how to manage them and all that kind of stuff. So pretty much everything's up for grabs. So it's a very exciting time from an opportunity perspective, because if you can integrate AI into pretty much anything out there, you've got an opportunity opening up. Okay? Now the trick is, over the last 50 years, we've really looked at artificial intelligence from the general perspective, and there's a kind of a spectrum here. We've got general AI, which is basically trying to recreate the human brain, everything in one AI, one system, right? What we're actually learning over the last couple of years is that you want to stay more focused on narrow AI, which is actually very task specific, and I'll explain this a little bit more as we go through the presentation. But the shift that has allowed this AI penetration over the last couple of years is the shift from general AI into narrow AI. And narrow AI is just getting very specific on very, very finite tasks. Okay, so instead of trying to create a system that could do everything the human brain does, you actually will create a system that does natural language. It reads blog posts, or it creates blog posts, or it's a chat bot, or whatever it may be. You want to stay very specific. The more focused you stay, typically the more successful you'll be. Okay. And there's a great quote, Andrew Ng, very popular guy in the space. A good rule of thumb is anything that a human being can do by thinking less than a second is something that's pretty much open for AI to automate today. Okay. So really what it comes down to, don't think in terms of one big system to do everything. Think in terms of a whole bunch of small ones, right? Even we see this in the software development world today. We talk about microservices versus forgot the word. But you want to think in terms of a lot of different small systems that you can, narrow AI applications that you can actually create with your software. And these are commercial APIs that are available today. Most of these are Microsoft APIs. So a ton of stuff you can do out there today. Okay. There's a lot of hype around having to hire new teams for AI-specific teams. I'm personally not a big fan of that. Most of the businesses I've worked with, that has not been required. We actually just needed new skills to use the technology and identify the opportunities. So I think in terms of not necessarily adding a new team, but more about just upgrading your existing team. Okay? And really what it comes down to is the same stuff we've had for business the last however many centuries. Right, you want to find the biggest thing you really need to worry about is finding the right technical expertise that can cut through all the hype and just understand what the business needs, and then apply that and cut through the hype and find the opportunities for commercial APIs or software developers or startups, whatever it may be, and then the business acumen to actually implement those in business context, right? And this is nothing new, right? This is the same stuff we've been doing the last, however many 20 years, right? Very familiar strategy. The only difference is you need the right expertise to actually get through the hype that's out there today. So it's easier than you think. Again, I think a lot of it comes down to the hype that's out there, really kind of complicating the system. There's actually kind of an AI maturity graph that I use a lot, which is basically broken down into two different things. You can have a commercial platform versus an in-house platform, and the training data is actually what creates the model for you. Like I mentioned a few slides back, we use machine learning to train the AI to do a certain task, right? So you need training data to actually create that, and you can either use your training data or the commercial API's training data. Okay, so the kind of maturity steps that we typically see is that you use a commercial platform, a commercial API with their training data, and there's a ton of those out there. Majority of these you're going to use their existing training data. So all you have to do is just plug right into it and go. You don't have to worry about any data or anything. The next step up is a lot of those commercial platforms will also allow you to use your own data to train the model. So you can actually use a commercial platform, basically use the cloud, and then use your own data. Right? And then the next step, which is really very much optional, which is basically just develop it all in-house. And this is where you would be looking at a dedicated team, developing an open source platform like TensorFlow or Caffe or one of the other libraries that are out there, and then using your own training data. So those are the really kind of different steps you can kind of go through. Like I mentioned before, there's pretty much every major cloud platform provider out there does have machine learning or artificial intelligence APIs you can use today. And most of them have a free tier, so you can just jump in and start playing with it, go ahead and start testing it out. Okay, it's faster than you think. And this is probably one of the key points here is that, as Andy had mentioned in his presentation, this is happening much faster than you probably think, right? Breakthroughs are coming fast and hard these days, and I could go through a long list of different examples there. But the point is the technology is very quickly catching up to the hype. Okay, this is not a traditional linear type of graph. This is exponential. This is hitting, thank you, 10 minutes left, is that what that is? What I'm actually seeing is that the biggest lag is actually figuring out how to take those technology advancements and put them into a product. Okay? And the example, actually, let me just go ahead. The example I like to use, the difference, things are happening faster, but also that's widening a gap, right? So the analogy I always like to use is if you're a business that's not using AI today and you're competing against a company that is using AI, it's like trying to race an Indy car using a skateboard, right? You just don't have the equipment to actually get the job done. Because the AI provides so much amplification to their existing staff or skills or whatever it may be, that it's really hard to close that gap after the fact. Okay, this is actually a little bit above and beyond. Is anybody familiar with quantum computing? Okay, so this is starting to come, this is another technology that's been hyped for the last 2-3 years. Excuse me, and it actually looks like it's starting to move ahead. And some of the quotes, so today we have standard PCs that are running on Intel chips or whatever it may be. Quantum computing is a completely different architecture. And some of the quotes that are out there is that it's millions of times faster than our existing PCs, right? And it's ideally suited, the way this architecture works, it's ideally suited for AI type of, very complex type of processing, which is very much aligned with AI type of systems. So you see most of these in the cloud, more than anything. And one of the guys that runs the artificial intelligence lab at Google is quoted as saying, within 10 years, nothing but quantum computing, machine learning running on quantum computing. So not only is everything happening faster from a technology breakthrough perspective, but we actually have the potential of taking a major leap forward in the capability of processing as well. Does that make sense? Okay. So get ahead of the curve. This is something that I like to do with my clients and my startups. We actually go through a list of different opportunities that we can just, kind of brainstorming different ideas of where we can apply AI in our business and across multiple different business units. And then I actually like to create a rating scale for it. So something that works right now, we give a 3-star. Something that's we want to get ready for it, and I'll explain that a little bit more as we go forward here. I give it 2 stars, and then something that's on the horizon it's 1 star. And this is not 10, 20 years out. This is 2 or 3 years right here. This is probably a year. Okay, so this kind of helps put everything in context. What are my opportunities? What do I want to focus on first? And then, as an example, so a customer support, the chatbots are all, buzz these days. And they're a 2-star. They're not perfect yet, but they're coming very quickly. And another thing I like to talk about is actually what I say, leading your shots, right? If anybody's a shooter in here, you always want to lead your shot, because if you shoot where the target is, you miss it, right? So that's basically what's happening. This technology is moving so quickly that if you wait until it actually is working properly or working where you need it, your competitors are already gone, or you actually may miss it. So good example is that the chatbot, right? So natural language isn't perfect yet, but it's actually very good, and it's going to probably take major strides over the next couple of years, possibly even a year. So I always recommend start looking into chatbots, right? Natural language, being able to actually communicate with your competitors through software, right? And that's an example of this, right? So you don't want to, technology is not perfect right now, but by the time you actually implement the system, get comfortable with it, have confidence it actually can perform what you need it to do, the technology will be there. Okay, so how we actually do this is I like to break it down into 5 different categories, which is marketing, support, product administration, and then innovation. And these are ranked by the quickest ROI. So if you focus on marketing, implementing AI and marketing, you actually get a quicker ROI versus support, customer support, actually adding AI into your actual products. This is internal processes, so HR and that type of stuff. And then innovation, right, which is obviously near and dear to our heart. Using AI for discovery and design, all that kind of stuff. So different ways you can do it. And then we actually do a repeating cycle. So we come in marketing and then just kind of continually refold through here. Okay. Thanks. Okay, so another thing I like to do is actually push out. So we've created a list and then prioritized it. So we've got a list of different ways that we can implement AI into the business, prioritize those. I actually hand those out to the business staff or the startup, whatever it may be, and leverage their ideas to develop new opportunities for where we can apply AI. So what are the capabilities? Where can we apply it in the business? And then hand that out to the staff and then let them come up with new ideas of how AI can improve their productivity, make their job easier, all that kind of stuff. And then of course, we're going to see a long list of startups today that talk about different ways you can implement AI. So this is going to be, that's why they want to do this presentation up front. There's a million startups out there that are doing really great things with AI. And it's just a matter of thinking up different ideas and where you can implement those systems into your business. Now, another thing that kind of flies in the face of a lot of the hype that's out there, if you actually look at the statistics out there, so a lot of people are talking about artificial intelligence is going to replace take everybody's job, right? But if you actually look at the numbers, and these are, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, right? 3 very AI-powered businesses today, they're actually growing, right? They're hiring more people. Right? And Andy kind of mentioned this in his presentation. Because AI has made them much more efficient, they can bring in more creativity, whatever, different roles. So I'm not a big fan of the whole AI is going to take all our jobs. There are certain jobs that will definitely be replaced by AI, but for the most part, we're actually seeing a growth. Okay? And then this is another one that's kind of above and beyond. This is kind of the leading your shot thing. I'm a big fan of starting to create a brain for the business, which is, if everybody's heard of the term knowledge graph, right? That's kind of a big thing in the search space these days because Google is building a knowledge graph of pretty much everything out there. And if you Google any type of object or landmark or person or whatever it may be, you will typically, if Google knows who they are, you'll get a block on the right-hand side that kind of lists everything that they know about the person. I'm a big fan of actually creating this for your own business, starting to capture the information that your business has and how it operates so it can make decisions on its own. Because eventually what we'll have is an AI that can make decisions for you or help, kind of guide decisions. And effectively what that looks like is it's a graph, right? So and a graph is nothing more than a regular database that links relationships. So it understands context within relationships of different entities in the database. So this can be pretty much anything. You guys have access to this slide, by the way, or the presentation. So again, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this. Like I said, I'm a big fan of starting to think in terms of creating kind of that central brain for your business where you're actually starting to capture knowledge of your business, okay? And if you think in terms of what this actually looks like down the road, imagine you have a chatbot, we talked about those before, that's interfacing with a customer, and that chatbot has access to this company knowledge, right? It has access to every transaction, every point of contact that customers had with your business on instant recall, right? They can solve any problem that the customer has instantly, right, in one session, right? Makes for very happy customers. Does that make sense? Okay. So key takeaway here. So those are the 10. I personally believe that AI should actually stand for augmented intelligence, right? It's not about general AI. It's not about trying to create one solution that solves every problem. It's about creating very specific AI systems that solve very specific problems, right? And that's augmenting people. Okay? That's it. Okay, thanks.